Overview of IT service management. You know, when you hear the term customer, you probably think of the guy renting a movie at Blockbuster, or a girl doing some online shopping, me waiting in line for some fast food, or a little boy screaming for the toy he wants in the aisle of a Target store. But with ITIL, we're going to expand the concept beyond just someone who buys goods or services. The customer of an IT service provider is a group or an individual who defines and agrees to the service level targets. Not sure what a service level target is? Well, that's okay. That's what this Nugget movie is for. But in a nutshell, a service level target is just a commitment from a service provider to a customer that gets documented in a service level agreement, or an SLA. In an organization, like a company or a nonprofit, a customer is also referred to many times as a user or an end user. And we'll look at how customers tie into service management in this nugget as we get an overview, a broad overview of information technology service management. In this CBT nugget, we'll get several firm definitions of what service management is according to the ITIL version 3. Then we'll look at services and quality. We'll break down organization and related policies. And then finally, we'll look at process management, a key aspect of IT service management. Now, right off the bat, I want to cover some key definitions from IT version 3 that you have to know that relate to service management. And the first one, of course, is services. But before I define services, let's talk about a product. For example, like a thermos. If you want to buy a thermos, you're typically going to go to the store or maybe go online and assess the quality of the thermos that you want to buy. You want to check out its appearance, its color, how useful is it? How can that thermos be applied in all the different situations that you might need a thermos? Out at a baseball game or a football game or camping. As a customer in a store, either online or in a brick and mortar store, we have a very little opportunity to actually influence the quality of the product. Why? Because the product's already produced in some factory somewhere. The manufacturer is going to try to deliver pretty constant quality, effectively controlling the production plant. When it comes to this thermos, the manufacturer, the sales, and the consumption of this product are totally separate. However, services are really a lot different. These are often provided through total interaction with a customer. And again, a customer has a broader definition here. Think of a customer as somebody in your organization or your company who needs the resources or the services of information technology. IT services can be a lot of things. Things like network bandwidth, data storage space, monitoring services, reporting and logging services, security services, application development, product management, program management, or troubleshooting. A lot of things that go beyond just the typical product that's offered. And the quality of a service is not like a product. It depends in a way on how the service provider and the customer interact and communicate and share information and meet each other's goals. In contrast to manufacturing, the customer and the service provider can make modifications and changes all along the process as the service is being delivered. And it's how the customer perceives the service and what the service provider thinks that they're supplying that delivers the end result, the personal customer experience, and whether expectations are met, exceeded, or not met. So fundamentally, a service is a way to deliver value to customers by facilitating the outcomes that a customer wants to achieve without having to take on specific costs and risks that they deem to be unacceptable. And again, it's that ownership of cost and risk that is an agreement between the customer and the service provider. Now, another concept related to service is that of a service asset. And a service asset is defined as any capability or resource that can be provided by a service provider. So typically we think of assets or things that a company owns, like the workstations and the servers and the personnel and money in the bank and intellectual property, things like that. But a service asset is sometimes much more ethereal. So it's like any capability, any resource, either whether it be physical or logical or personnel related, of a service provider, somebody who provides services. This could be either in-house or somebody that's outside of your organization, outsourced. So obviously if a provider has services and service assets, you need to be able to manage those services, either from the provider's side or from the customer or end user side. And that's where service management comes in. Now think about it. Why does information technology exist in an organization? Well, almost across the board, IT is there to support the business in its activities of generating profit. Now, if it's a nonprofit, then it's the activities of meeting its organizational goals, its mission statement. And it does this by doing the things I mentioned earlier, providing those services, storing data, sorting data, making data available, mining the data, facilitating communications through networking, either wired or wireless, speeding up business activity, providing productivity tools like Microsoft Office, for example, improving the accuracy of repetitive functions, improving the consistency of repetitive activities, and then making it possible on a daily basis for creative solutions to generate profits or to more effectively and efficiently meet the mission statement of a nonprofit organization. And this is such a key aspect, and it's tied so closely to the business needs and the business goals that it must be managed effectively. So a fundamental definition of service management is a set or a group of specialized organizational capabilities or functions that provide value to customers in the form of services, not goods, but services. Now, essential to the providing of services is customer perception. I'm going to jot down here customer, because it's the customer expectations and requirements that tie closely into managing our services. Customers generally ask some questions to assess the quality of a service. Just like earlier, we had basic questions to assess the value of a thermos, for example. So when I screw the lid on the thermos and I turn it upside down, will it leak or will it not leak? That's something you look for in a thermos. Does it keep the liquid inside hot or cold? Is it impervious to being manhandled? Those are kind of questions that we ask of a product. But a service, a customer wants to know, will this service meet their expectations? Can they expect a similar service every time? If I go to a service provider, I want consistent service. If I'm going to somebody in my organization or outside of the organization to develop a software solution or a custom application, can I get similar service every time I go to them? And is that service provided at a reasonable cost? And so management is necessary to deliver those answers, first of all, to the customer, and then after that, to deliver the result that we promise to the customer. And that's where something called service level target comes in. I mentioned, I'll put SLT here. I mentioned service level target in the introduction, okay? This is that commitment to the customer. And this is typically documented in a service level agreement, SLA. And we're going to talk much more about service level agreements throughout this Nugget series. But we need these agreements to make sure that the IT service, that the design of the service meets the purpose, that it's a custom fit for that customer. And service level targets and agreements are based on some accepted standards, and we'll look at those. Now remember, ITIL is all about processes and frameworks and best practices. So this process of managing and delivering services from the provider to the customer has a life cycle. So since there is a life cycle of this process, we want to be able to manage that cycle. And this is basically an approach to IT service management that places emphasis on the importance and the value of coordination. and control of the process across all the various functions, all the various systems, and all the various processes to manage this full life cycle of information technology services. So this is in itself a huge discipline, and we'll talk more about this later, of course. Service management life cycle is going to consider several things, and most of these things happen to be, by the way, the books or the publications of ITIL. Okay, strategy, design, transition, operation, and continuous improvement. See how I did that? Okay, so this ties into those general books and publications. And of course, the person responsible for managing this end-to-end life cycle of service management is the service manager. And of course, that's your long-term goal if you decide to go beyond just the ITIL foundations, from the practitioner all the way up to the full-blown manager. The manager within the IT service provider. And this could be a business relationship manager, a process manager, an account manager, or all the way up to senior management with the responsibility of overall IT services, perhaps a chief information officer or a chief security officer, someone like that. Now, a big part of all of this management of service is making sure that the service that you deliver has quality built in, quality assurance, quality control. So let's look next at a very popular quality circle that gives us a step-by-step process, and this is called Deming's Quality Circle. Here's our buddy again, Dr. W. Edwards Deming, and he came up with his quality circle. It's all about quality, and quality is basically meeting or exceeding customer expectations. And Deming developed theories about the ability of systems to produce quality and the resulting changes in output quality that happen when modifications are made within the system. And he proposed a system of continuous improvement. And think of continuous improvement more in the sense of services rather than improving a product, like making a better thermos. Managers get input from workers and their peers to improve quality over time. So he developed a simple cycle called PDCA. So we've got P for plan, we've got D for do, we've got C for check, and we have finally A for act. And so we want to remember that. Now, remember the continuous improvement process, the circle is kind of running this way. So it's going clockwise. And the circle's moving across this line. And what we're shooting for here is managing and consolidating our improvements and then reaching continual quality assurance, continual quality improvement. Of course, this is our upward level of improvement or quality, and what we have right down here in this line, this is time. Okay, so obviously this process takes time. So first of all, we plan. This is step one. Planning involves designing or revising the business process components to improve the results. Then, secondly, we do. We put the plan into place. We put it into action. We implement it, and then we measure its performance. And then thirdly, we check. Okay? We assess the measurements, and we report the results to the decision makers. And then finally, the fourth step is to act. We decide upon the changes we need to improve the process, and we put them into place, and we make the improvement possible. And of course, this is a continuous process that goes on over and over and over as this circle moves from plan to do to check to act, and over and over and over, based on our service over the course of time, we get quality assurance, QA, and we get constant improvement. As we sit here and reflect upon Deming's quality circle, let's think about some of the things that we mentioned in the previous Nugget movie, and some of the things that Dr. Deming said. Remember, quality management, quality assurance, meeting and exceeding the customer's expectations is the responsibility of everyone in the organization who's providing that service. And every employee has to know their contribution to the process, to the quality of the work, and to the effects of delivering quality services. Quality management also means continuously seeking out opportunities to improve the organization and put those things into place. This is also a policy matter. So this should happen at the top. Okay, this is part of our, that's an O, this is part of our policy, and it should flow down from decision makers to upper management to middle management all the way down to the end worker. Now it would help you to know that there's an ISO standard out there, and sometimes in these models you will see somewhere right in here you'll see this ISO 9000. And many companies actually put into place certification processes to adhere and get certified with the ISO 9000. The ISO 9000 is a series of standards that's often used to develop, define, assess, and improve quality systems. Remember the big picture here. We're talking about service management, specifically IT service management, and one of the main components of that is quality, making sure you deliver quality services. And some organizations and sub-businesses demand that their vendors or their suppliers or their strategic partners hold some type of certificate. The ISO 9001 or ISO 9002 certificate to prove that they have adequate quality systems in place that have been regularly assessed by an independent ISO 9000 auditor. So the ISO, as you can see here, this is their website, the International Organization for Standardization, and what we're looking at here is the ISO 9000 and 14,000, which are closely related. This is a good website that you might want to add to your favorites to go in and just get a brief understanding of the basics of ISO 9000. And this is pretty cute, the magical demystifying tour, because a lot of companies have to put this in place, small to medium-sized enterprise organizations, to make sure what? Well, that they've taken the right measures to provide the quality that's been agreed with their customers. Again, with service level targets, service level agreements. Mechanisms so that management can assess the operation of quality systems. Making sure that the supplier's procedures are documented and communicated, recording customer complaints, dealing with them in a reasonable amount of time, and then improving the services wherever possible. Now, the ISO certificate that's given out doesn't give an absolute guarantee, but it does indicate that the supplier is taking quality assurance seriously and is ready to talk about it at any time. For example, here's a blatant example in Japan of a fish supplier that actually has in large letters up here on the outside of their building ISO-9001, advertising that, hey, look, we are ISO 9000 certified and we're ready to show you the results of auditing and investigations that have been done to make sure that we're providing quality assurance. And this is an example of a fish market and really a product, but this can apply to IT services as well. Now, just a while back, I alluded to how service management has to tie into the overall corporate policy. And in this diagram here, we show the relationship between the vision of the organization, the company's objectives, and policies. We want to relate this to IT service management. Most organizations are going to have a vision, okay? What's the overall goal? Maybe it's to sell custom-made NFL football team thermoses on the internet. Maybe you're a training company like CBT Nuggets. So whether you're a fraternity at a small college all the way up to a multinational corporation, you're going to have a shared concept of why you cooperate in this organization. That's your vision. Then that'll lead to what we call a mission statement. And the mission statement is typically a short, clear, written description of the objectives of the organization and the values that it believes in. And these are usually either printed out and given to each new employee, or they may be posted somewhere on a wall as you walk into the building. A mission and objectives tie hand in hand, but objectives basically describe in greater detail what your vision and your mission are. Good objectives are going to fall into the category of SMART. Get smart, okay? Remember Maxwell Smart, that TV show from the 60s? Get smart? Well, your objectives should have 5 essential elements. They should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be appropriate, they should be realistic, and they should be bound by time or time-bound. This SMART essentials is a well-known attribute of corporate objectives. Then this is all going to lead the vision, the mission statement, and the objectives are all going to relate to the overall governing policy. This is the combination of all the decisions, all the measures, all the actions that are taken to define and realize vision, mission, and objectives. Now these may change over time, circumstances change, mergers, buyouts, alliances, changes in the marketplace, but the clearer the policies of the organization are to the stakeholders, the less they need to be worried about the day-to-day aspects of how people in the organization are going to get the work done and achieve those goals. Policies are used as guidelines. And again, we're talking about policies here under the umbrella of IT service management. Now, how do we get to the results of these specific policies? Well, lots of planning. Lots and lots of planning. This means dividing it up into different phases or stages. And this is where time comes into place. This is often done with project management. This involves planning for the quantity of resources needed and the quality of resources needed and cost versus revenue. All these things come into play in the planning process. There's various methods for measuring the planning all along the way. You've got what's called BSC, or Business Scorecard. With BSC, the objectives of the organization or the processes are going to be used to define CSF, or Critical Success Factors. And it's the achieving of the critical success factors that dictate the score on the scorecard. CSFs are a number of areas of interest or perspective, things like personnel, innovation, research and development, finance, market, customer support, those types of things. The indicators that dictate the critical success factors are often referred to as KPI, Key Performance Indicators. And these can be subdivided or broken down into smaller performance indicators. So these are the four elements of planning. These two go together, cost versus revenue. Sorry about the bullet point there, but you've got planning, where time. Time is the easiest thing to determine, okay? The start date and end date, divided into phases or stages. Quantity, the objectives in measurable terms to monitor progress. The quantity of resources needed. Quality, the quality of the deliverables, the results. This is based on your service level agreements. And cost and revenues. The deliverables, the service deliverables must be in proportion to the expected costs, the expected revenues of the organizations. And that leads to specific tasks and actions that ultimately implement the processes. And this is the vision, objectives, and policies leading to IT service management processing. Well, as we saw from the previous diagram, the entire vision and mission statement and objectives and policy all leads to processes, or the implementation of processes. W. Edwards Deming said, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Now, how do we define what a process is? Well, here's an official ITIL definition. Process is defined as a series of related activities aimed at achieving a set of objectives in a measurable, usually repeatable manner. It defines information inputs and outputs, consumes resources, and is subjected to management controls and policy over time, cost, and quality. So process management is also referred to as this phrase, which is manage to process. Previously, we've established the why. Okay, that's the mission, the vision, the objectives, the policy. That's the why. The process management, or manage to process, is the where and the how. Where do we want to be as an organization? Where are we now? Assessing the present state of the organization or the company. Then how? How do we get where we want to be? That's involving processes. And how do we know that we've arrived? That's what we call measurement and control. And this measurement and control is really management, and it's done all along the way, and we measure with what are called metrics. Quantifiable indicators, performance indicators, day-to-day controlled based on baseline data that should have been established in the beginning. Now, when we look at processes, we always have to look at processes under the umbrella of its relationship with other processes. I mean, think about the relationships of processes in delivering a CBT nugget, for example. You have subject matter experts. They're using hardware and software to deliver modules. These modules go to CBT nuggets to quality control. You've got quality control processes. You got technical editing processes. And then once it gets through that process, it moves to the transfer of the information, the digital information, to database. You got database processing where you take it in its format on the database, convert it to a DVD format or maybe a streaming format. Then you involve other processes like sales, customer service, billing, legal services to make sure, for example, that the content is not pirated on places like eBay, for example. You've got the shipping processes. You've got the human resource processes for the organization itself. So as you see, this whole IT infrastructure and service management is interrelated. It's an interrelated organism. And you have relationships between these processes. It's input and then process ownership, process management, process operatives, and then output. Let me give you a little diagram here. First of all, we have input. Let's think of input as the services we're providing as an IT service organization or department. And we're inputting this service into this process, okay? So the process has to be managed to get to a defined objective. And of course, underneath, or I guess surrounding all of this, is quality. So we want to keep that in mind all the time. Quality and efficiency. That input is going to become what we call actions. And we saw this earlier in that flow chart. Actions or functions. Of course, the actions and the tasks are going to lead to implementation. I'll just put implementation here, and that is the output, okay? The output. Now, part of managing this process and these processes that work together is measurement, okay? Measuring all along the results of these processes, controlling these actions and these processes, monitoring, logging, assessment, okay? Now, what defines how we measure, how we control, how we assess, how we implement quality and efficiency into this organism? This is done using policies, okay? Policies, standards, guidelines, I'll put GL there, all generated from the vision, from the mission statement, from the objectives, you see. And this is how ITIL delivers such powerful results. It gives us a framework under which we can implement these specific processes. This ITIL approach forms the foundation for IT service management and service delivery. Let me show you a generic ITIL process model. Here's a better example of that kind of generic process model I was alluding to earlier, where we have input that comes into our established set of processes, process activities, functions, and sub-processes. What might some of those be? Well, they might be help desk, or service desk, or customer support, or technical support. The input obviously being questions and queries or complaints that come from an end user or a customer. Of course, the output should get us to our goal, which is continual improvement and adding more to the bottom line. These processes, these functions, these sub-processes don't work in a vacuum. We have to enable these processes with components. We have to control and manage these processes. So first of all, we have the components that actually enable processes. And that is the fact that individuals in our organization are going to serve particular roles. For example, they might work on the tech support system, the help desk. They may be in management, middle management, customer service, and then all the resources that it takes to deliver quality. And of course, these roles and resources, there may be departments, can be working together to meet all the aspects of customer demands. Quality, availability, capacity, cost, and stability. These resources can be people, they can be software, they can be intellectual property, they can be hardware, it can be money and time. These are the things that enable these processes. And then of course we have the elements that control the processes, and that are the parameters that lead us to getting service quality or product quality. We've got key performance indicators, metrics that we use all along the way, qualitative and quantitative, to give us measurable results of if we're meeting our goals, if the process is effective or ineffective, and is the output meeting the policy and vision and mission statement and procedures that have been agreed upon by the stakeholders. And so this is kind of a generic look at the ITIL process model. Now what we're going to do next in the nugget that follows this one, and I'm really excited about it because we're really starting to get into the actual real world aspect of some of these generic processes, and that is the concept so vital, so important to IT management, and that's the service desk. And this is the first key aspect, or the first key process we're going to look at here in our ITIL service management framework. So we'll look at service desk in the next nugget. As we learned in this nugget, IT service management is really the process and service focused approach of what we know as IT management. We found out that processes should always have a defined goal, a defined objective. We want to contribute to the quality of IT services, bringing value to the bottom line of our organization or our company. And quality management and process control are going to make up a huge chunk of the organization and its policies. ITIL is the best known approach to IT service management. And in this nugget, we defined service management, we looked at services and quality, organization and policies, and then we finished up looking at process management. Now we're going to get granular and look at actual specific processes starting in the next nugget. I hope this CBT nugget has been informative for you. I want to thank you for viewing. See you later.